Oh no! Why is this black man here?
The flight attendant didn't speak softly. Every passenger on the boarding bridge heard her.
Did you just finish sweeping? There's nothing left to sweep.
The man in the charcoal suit didn't flinch. He handed over his boarding pass. Seat 2A, first class.
Ma'am, I have a ticket.
I don't care. You stole it.
Her eyes scanned him from head to toe as if she were guarding against a plague. The man said nothing. She called 911, had him handcuffed. She thought she had won. But when he opened the briefcase containing the boarding pass, she recoiled.
No, that can't be true.
3 golden letters. FBI. What happened next didn't just end her shift. It ended her career. What did she lose then? She never expected it. The alarm went off at 4:45 a.m. Preston Walker's hand found the phone before his eyes opened. He silenced it and lay still for a moment. The ceiling fan hummed above him. A thin line of early light crept through the blinds. He swung his legs off the bed. No rush, no panic, just routine. In the bathroom, he splashed cold water on his face. The mirror showed a man who hadn't missed a morning in 22 years. Clean shave, sharp jaw, tired eyes, but focused. He walked to the closet and pulled out a charcoal suit. Not flashy, not cheap, the kind of suit that said everything without saying a word. He buttoned the shirt slowly, knotted the silk tie with a single smooth pull, adjusted the collar. Then he opened the top drawer of his dresser. Inside, next to his watch and wedding ring, sat a leather credential case. Gold badge on one side, photo ID on the other. The letters across the top read, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Underneath the photo, Preston Walker, Special Agent in Charge, Atlanta Field Office. He didn't clip it to his belt. He slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Quiet, out of sight, the way he always carried it when traveling civilian. His phone buzzed. A text from Deputy Director Carolyn Bassett. Briefing confirmed, 9 a.m. tomorrow. DOJ expects your trafficking report. Don't be late. He typed back, when have I ever been late? Preston led a 200-agent task force. He had testified before Congress. He had shaken hands with 2 attorneys general. His name sat on commendations that lined the wall of his home office. But none of that was visible. Not today. Today, he was just a black man in a nice suit catching an early flight. He stopped at the last door in the hallway, pushed it open gently. His daughter lay curled under a purple blanket, 12 years old, still asleep. He kissed her forehead. Love you, baby girl. She stirred, but didn't wake. He grabbed his briefcase and walked out into the Atlanta dark. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, 6:15 a.m. The terminal buzzed with early morning energy. Rolling suitcases clicked across tile floors. Coffee kiosks hissed with steam. Overhead announcements echoed off the high glass ceilings. Preston moved through TSA pre-check without a word. Shoes on, belt on, briefcase through the scanner. Done in 2 minutes. He found a seat at gate B12 and opened the classified briefing folder. Red block letters across the cover. Confidential, DOJ. A white businessman sat down next to him, loosened tie, coffee in hand. DC bound? Preston looked up. Yeah, early one. Tell me about it. 3rd time this month. The man shook his head and smiled. Safe travels, brother. You too. Normal. Easy. The way it's supposed to be. The gate screen read, SkyPoint Airlines Flight 1482, Atlanta to Washington Dulles. Boarding, 6:40 a.m. 20 feet away, behind the gate counter, Brenda Collins adjusted her scarf in a compact mirror. 54 years old, 22 years with SkyPoint Airlines. Senior flight attendant. Lead crew on today's flight. She wore her seniority like armor. A younger crew member stood beside her, organizing boarding passes. Full flight today, the young woman said. Brenda didn't look up. It's always full. Her eyes drifted across the gate area. Business travelers, families, college kids with backpacks. Then she spotted a black family, mother, father, 2 small children, sitting near the priority lane. Brenda leaned toward her colleague, lowered her voice, but not low enough. Watch, they'll try to board with Zone 1. The younger woman gave an awkward laugh, looked away. Brenda snapped her compact shut and straightened her blazer. She walked toward the jet bridge entrance and took her position. The first-class passengers began to board. A white man in a navy blazer. Brenda smiled wide. "Welcome aboard, sir. Can I help with your jacket?" A white woman with a designer bag. Same warm smile. "Good morning, ma'am. You're in 1C, right up front." Then Preston Walker appeared at the entrance. Charcoal suit, briefcase in hand, boarding pass visible. Brenda's smile vanished. Her posture stiffened, her chin lifted, and the words that came out of her mouth would change both of their lives forever. Oh no. Why is this black man here? Brenda's voice hit the jet bridge like a slap. Loud, sharp, no hesitation. Preston stopped mid-step. His boarding pass was in his right hand. Seat 2A, first class, clearly printed, clearly visible. "Did you just finish sweeping garbage? Nothing left to sweep here." 2 passengers behind him went quiet. A woman in a business suit looked at the floor. A man in a polo shirt cleared his throat, but said nothing. Preston didn't raise his voice, didn't clench his fist. He held the boarding pass higher. "Ma'am, I have a ticket." "I don't care. You stole it." She didn't take the boarding pass. She grabbed it, snatched it out of his hand like she was confiscating contraband from a child. She held it up to the fluorescent light, flipped it over, studied it for 10, 15, 20 seconds. The jet bridge was narrow. Passengers were backing up behind Preston. No one could move. Everyone could hear. Brenda squinted at the pass, then at Preston, then at the pass again. "Where did you get this?" "I bought it through my employer's travel office." "Your employer?" She almost laughed. "Right. And who exactly employs someone like you in first class?" Preston looked at her. Steady. Controlled. "I'm a federal employee, ma'am." "Federal employee." She let the words drip with sarcasm. "Sure you are. And I'm the Queen of England." She thrust the boarding pass back at him. But she didn't step aside. She stood there, blocking the jet bridge entrance, arms crossed. "I'm going to need to verify this. Wait here." "Ma'am, the boarding pass is valid. I'd like to take my seat." "I said, wait." She turned and walked into the aircraft. Preston stood alone in the jet bridge. The fluorescent lights buzzed above him. The faint smell of jet fuel crept through the walls. Behind him, passengers shuffled past in silence. Some avoided eye contact. Some stared. An elderly white woman, mid-60s, silver hair, reading glasses around her neck, paused as she passed him. She looked at Preston, then looked toward where Brenda had disappeared. Her jaw tightened. Her name was Diane Aldridge, retired schoolteacher, seat 3C. She said nothing, but she noticed everything. 2 minutes passed, then 3. Preston stood motionless, briefcase at his side, hands at his sides, waiting in a jet bridge like a suspect waiting to be processed. Finally, Brenda reappeared. She didn't apologize, didn't explain. She simply stepped aside, barely, and waved him through with 2 fingers, like she was directing traffic. Go. One word. No welcome aboard. No sorry for the wait. Just go. Preston walked past her and entered the cabin. First class was small. 3 rows, 12 seats. Cream leather, warm lighting. The kind of quiet that costs money. Preston found 2A, window seat, left side. He placed his leather briefcase in the overhead bin directly above his row, clicked it shut, sat down, buckled his seatbelt, folded his hands. 90 seconds of peace. Then Brenda appeared at his row. Sir, that overhead bin is reserved for row 1 passengers. Move your bag. Preston looked up. I'm in row 2. The bin above row 2 is appropriate for row 2 passengers. I'm telling you to move it. Those are the rules. Ma'am, I've flown this airline dozens of times. There is no such rule. Brenda's nostrils flared. She leaned in closer, close enough for him to smell her perfume. Sharp, floral, aggressive. I don't care how many times you've flown. On my plane, I make the rules. Move the bag or I call the captain. Preston held her gaze, calm, unwavering. Then call the captain. Brenda straightened up, her face flushed red. She spun on her heel and marched toward the galley. At that exact moment, a white man in a rumpled sport coat boarded. Late, slightly out of breath. He shoved a bulky carry-on into the same overhead bin. The one Brenda had just told Preston was reserved. Brenda walked right past him, didn't say a word, didn't even glance at the bag. Diane Aldridge saw it all from 3C. She reached into her purse, quietly, slowly. She pulled out her phone, tilted it toward the aisle, and pressed record. 3 minutes later, Brenda returned. This time, she carried a printed form. Passenger Incident Report, the kind of document airlines use when someone is about to get removed from a flight. She stood at the edge of Preston's row and spoke loudly, deliberately loudly, loudly enough for every passenger in first class to hear. Sir, I'm going to need your full legal name and a government-issued photo ID. For what purpose? Security documentation. This is standard procedure. It was not standard procedure. There was nothing standard about any of this. But Preston reached into his pocket and handed her his driver's license. Not his FBI credentials. His regular Georgia driver's license. Brenda studied it like a detective examining evidence. She wrote down his name, his date of birth, his address. Slowly, meticulously, standing over him the entire time. A passenger in row 1 leaned over and whispered to his wife, "What did that guy do?" His wife whispered back, "I don't think he did anything." Brenda handed the license back without a word. She walked to the galley, picked up the interphone, and called the cockpit. Captain Simmons, this is Brenda. We have a situation in 2A. Her voice was calm now, professional, practiced. The voice of someone who had learned exactly how to frame a complaint. Disruptive passenger, refusing to comply with crew instructions. I don't feel safe with him on this aircraft. Captain Lloyd Simmons was on the other end. 58 years old, 30 years of flying. He had never met the passenger in 2A. He had never seen the passenger in 2A. He had only Brenda's words. Copy that. I'll contact airport operations. Simmons picked up the radio and requested law enforcement assistance at gate B12. 4 minutes later, the aircraft door opened. 2 airport police officers stepped into the cabin. The first was Officer Dale Hutchinson, late 30s, broad shoulders, buzz cut. His hand rested on his belt, not on his gun, but close enough. Close to his taser, close enough to send a message. His partner followed, younger, quieter, eyes scanning. Hutchinson walked straight to row 2. He didn't ask Brenda what happened. He didn't speak to any other passenger. He didn't assess the situation. He went directly to the black man. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step off the aircraft." Preston looked up at him. "Officer, can you tell me what I've done?" "We've received a report of a disruptive passenger. You can step off voluntarily, or I can remove you. Your choice." The cabin went silent. 12 first-class passengers. Not one spoke. The hum of the aircraft's auxiliary power unit filled the void. A child in row 3 tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, why are the police here?" The mother pulled the child close. "Shh, don't look." Preston unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood slowly, buttoned his jacket, straightened his tie. He didn't argue, he didn't resist, he didn't raise his voice. He stepped into the aisle and walked toward the exit, one step at a time, back straight, head high. Every passenger watched him pass. Some looked away, some couldn't. Diane Aldridge kept her phone steady, recording. Her hands were trembling, but the camera never moved. Brenda stood by the galley, arms crossed, chin up. As Preston passed her, she turned to her colleague and said, quietly, but not quietly enough, "That's how you handle them." Diane's phone caught every word. The jet bridge felt smaller now. Hutchinson positioned Preston at the far end, near the terminal door. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The walls were scuffed gray. The carpet smelled like rubber and recycled air. It was the kind of space people walked through without thinking, unless they were being held in it. Preston stood with his hands at his sides, briefcase on the ground beside him. No handcuffs. Not yet. But the message was clear. Hutchinson's partner hung back, one hand on his radio, watching. Hutchinson stepped forward. Close. Too close. The kind of distance that isn't professional. It's personal. ID. The flight attendant already checked my identification. I don't care what she checked. I'm asking you. ID. Now. Preston reached into his jacket pocket, slowly, deliberately, and produced his Georgia driver's license. He held it out. Hutchinson snatched it, the same way Brenda had snatched his boarding pass. He turned to his partner. "Run it." The partner keyed the radio, read out Preston's name, date of birth, license number. The response came back in under a minute. No warrants, no flags, no criminal history, nothing. Hutchinson stared at the radio like it had betrayed him. He looked back at Preston. His jaw shifted. Something behind his eyes recalculated. But he didn't let go. "What do you do for a living?" It wasn't a question. It was an accusation shaped like a question. The tone said, "I don't believe you belong here. Prove it." "I'm a federal employee." Hutchinson tilted his head. A slow smirk crept across his face, the kind of smirk that made Preston's jaw tighten, though nothing on the outside moved. "Federal employee," Hutchinson repeated it like a joke. "What kind of federal employee flies first class?" "The kind that's authorized to." Hutchinson's smirk faded. He didn't like that answer. He stepped even closer. Preston could smell the coffee on his breath, stale, bitter, like something left too long on a burner. "You got a smart mouth, you know that?" Preston said nothing. "I asked you a question." "And I answered it, officer." Silence. 3 seconds. 5. The fluorescent light above them flickered once. A gate announcement echoed from the terminal, muffled, distant, like a sound from another world. Hutchinson turned to his partner. "Search his bag." Preston's voice was calm, measured, the voice of a man who had spent 22 years in law enforcement and knew exactly where the line was. "On what grounds?" A crew member reported suspicious behavior. That gives me reasonable suspicion. A crew member's personal discomfort is not reasonable suspicion under the Fourth Amendment, officer. Hutchinson's face went tight. His neck flushed red. A vein pulsed at his temple. Nobody talked to him like this. Not here, not in his jet bridge. Are you a lawyer now? No, I'm a citizen who knows his rights. Yeah? Well, right now, you're a citizen standing in my jet bridge with a crew member who says you're a problem. So you can let me check your bag, or I can detain you for refusing to cooperate with a security investigation. Your call. The threat hung in the air. Preston breathed in, held it, breathed out. He could have stopped him. Legally, he had every right to refuse. But he had also spent 22 years watching what happens when black men assert their rights in confined spaces with armed officers. He had trained agents on de-escalation. He had lectured at Quantico about use of force. Now he was on the other side of it. He unclenched his fingers, one by one, and let it happen. Hutchinson bent down and grabbed the briefcase. He unzipped it roughly and spread it open on the jet bridge floor like he was unpacking a crime scene. Inside, a classified briefing folder marked Confidential, DOJ. A bureau-issued laptop, a leather credential case, closed, tucked into the side pocket. Hutchinson picked up the briefing folder, flipped it open, leafed through the pages carelessly. He wasn't reading. He was performing. Each page turned was a small act of dominance, a slow, deliberate show of power. He didn't understand a word of what he was looking at. Threat assessments, trafficking networks, federal grand jury timelines, classified material that required security clearance he would never in his career possess. He tossed the folder back into the briefcase, carelessly, one page bent at the corner. Then his hand moved toward the credential case. Preston's heart rate, for the first time, ticked upward. Not from fear, from calculation. If Hutchinson opened that case, this would end right now. The badge would change everything in an instant. But Hutchinson didn't open it. He picked it up, felt its weight, turned it over once, and set it back down. He didn't care what it was. He had already decided who Preston was. A leather case wasn't going to change his mind. He zipped the briefcase shut, stood up, brushed off his hands like he had just taken out the trash. All right, you're clear. You can go. He held the briefcase out, not handing it, dangling it, 2 fingers on the handle, making Preston reach for it. Preston took it, said nothing. Hutchinson leaned in one last time, voice low, almost a whisper, close enough that only Preston could hear. Next time, cooperate. It'll go easier for you. I promise. The word promise sat in the air like smoke. Preston turned and walked back toward the aircraft. The cabin door was still open. A ground crew member stepped aside to let him through. Inside, the first-class cabin was full now, every seat occupied, every pair of eyes lifted. 12 passengers, 24 eyes, all watching a black man walk back to his seat after being escorted off by police. The silence was deafening. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that presses against your chest, the kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. Preston walked down the aisle, seat 2A. 5 steps. It felt like 50. He sat down, buckled his seatbelt, placed the briefcase under the seat in front of him, folded his hands, looked straight ahead. Nobody spoke. Then Brenda's voice came over the PA system. Bright, cheerful, poisonous. Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely apologize for the delay this morning. We had a small security matter that has been resolved. Thank you so much for your patience. We'll have you in the air shortly. Security matter. She made eye contact with Preston as she said it, held it for 2 full seconds. Then she smiled, slow, deliberate, the kind of smile that doesn't say, "I'm happy." It says, "I won, and there's nothing you can do about it." The businessman in row 1 shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The woman in 1C suddenly became fascinated with her magazine. The man in 2B stared out the opposite window like his life depended on it. Nobody made eye contact with Preston. Nobody said a word, except one person. A white man in the row behind him leaned forward, close enough to whisper, "Hey, I saw the whole thing. That was wrong, man. I'm sorry." Preston nodded. Once. Didn't turn around. "Thank you." 2 words. That's all he could manage. Because if he said anything else, if he opened that door even a crack, 22 years of discipline might not be enough to hold back what was building inside him. Diane Aldridge lowered her phone in 3C. She had recorded everything. The reboarding, Brenda's announcement, the eye contact, the smile, every frame, every second. She saved the video, put the phone back in her purse, closed the clasp with trembling fingers. The aircraft door closed. The engines began to whine, low at first, then building into a steady roar. The plane pushed back from the gate. Preston stared out the window. The tarmac stretched flat and gray under the morning sun. A baggage cart rolled past. A ground worker in an orange vest waved a signal. The terminal shrank behind them. Everything outside was moving. Everything inside Preston was still. But still is not the same as empty. Calm is not the same as defeated. And silence is not the same as surrender. Something was building. Quiet, patient, inevitable. And Brenda Collins had absolutely no idea what she had just set in motion. 2 hours and 14 minutes. That's how long Preston Walker sat in seat 2A without saying a word, without pressing the call button, without asking for anything. Brenda worked the first-class cabin like she owned it. Champagne for 1A, warm nuts for 1C, fresh napkins for 2B. She moved row by row, passenger by passenger, smile by smile. She skipped 2A every time. The first pass, she looked right through him, like the seat was empty, like he wasn't there. The second pass, Preston raised his hand, politely, calmly. "Excuse me, could I get a glass of water?" Brenda kept walking. He waited 10 minutes, raised his hand again. "Ma'am, just water, please." She stopped, turned slowly, looked at him the way you'd look at a fly buzzing near your plate. "I'll get to you when I get to you." 5 minutes later, she returned. A plastic cup, not a glass, a plastic cup, filled halfway with lukewarm water. She set it on his tray without a napkin, didn't make eye contact. The cup hit the tray hard enough to splash. She walked away. Preston looked at the cup, half full, lukewarm, no napkin. He didn't drink it. He opened his bureau-issued laptop instead, pulled up his email, and began typing. Slowly, precisely. Every word chosen with the same care he used when drafting federal warrants. Nobody on that plane knew what he was writing. Not yet. The seatbelt sign dinged on. The captain's voice came over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Washington Dulles International Airport. Local time is 8:52 a.m. Temperature is 61 degrees. Thank you for flying SkyPoint Airlines." The plane touched down at 9:04 a.m. Smooth landing, gentle braking. The cabin lights came on. Seatbelt signs turned off with a soft chime. Passengers began to move. Overhead bins opened, bags shuffled, jackets rustled, the usual orchestra of arrival. Preston didn't move. He sat still, hands folded, laptop closed, briefcase untouched under the seat in front of him. Row 1 deplaned. Row 2B stood, grabbed his bag, and left. Row 3 emptied. Diane Aldridge passed Preston's row. She paused, just for a heartbeat, and their eyes met. She gave him a small nod. He returned it. Then she was gone. The cabin was nearly empty now. A few economy passengers filed past. Then no one. Just Preston. And Brenda. Brenda walked up the aisle toward the cockpit, then stopped when she saw him still sitting there. Her eyebrows pinched together. "Sir, the flight is over. You need to deplane. Now." Preston looked up at her. For the first time since the jet bridge, he spoke more than a few words. "I'll deplane when I'm ready. But first, I need to speak with your captain." Brenda let out a short, sharp laugh. The kind of laugh designed to belittle. "The captain doesn't have time to—" "I wasn't asking." 2 words. Quiet. But they landed like a hammer on glass. Brenda's smile cracked. Something in his tone, something she hadn't heard before, made her take a half step backward. Preston reached into his jacket. Brenda flinched. Her eyes darted to his hand. He pulled out the leather credential case, the same one Hutchinson had held in the jet bridge, the same one nobody had bothered to open. He flipped it open. Gold shield on the left, photo ID on the right. 3 letters across the top, bold, blue, unmistakable. FBI. Preston Walker, Special Agent in Charge, Atlanta Field Office. Brenda's eyes locked onto the badge. Her lips parted. The color left her face. Not slowly, not gradually. All at once, like someone had pulled a plug. Her knees softened. She grabbed the headrest of 2B to steady herself. "No, that's not—" "My name is Special Agent in Charge Preston Walker." His voice was level, almost gentle, which made it worse. "You just had airport police illegally detain, interrogate, and search a senior federal law enforcement official because you decided a black man didn't belong in first class." He paused. Let the silence do its work. Brenda's hands were shaking. Her mouth moved, but nothing came out. She tried twice, 3 times. I was following procedure." "There is no procedure for what you did, Ms. Collins." Her chin dropped. Her eyes went glassy. She looked like someone watching their entire life rearrange in real time. "I strongly suggest you contact your union representative today." Preston closed the credential case, slid it back into his jacket. At that moment, the cockpit door opened. Captain Lloyd Simmons stepped into the cabin. He saw Brenda, pale, gripping a headrest, barely standing. He saw Preston, seated, composed, unmoved. "What's going on here?" Preston stood, extended the credential case again. Simmons looked at the badge. His face changed instantly. The blood drained from his cheeks the same way it had drained from Brenda's. "Captain Simmons, you authorized the removal of a passenger based solely on a crew member's word? No disruptive behavior occurred. No threat assessment was conducted. You relied on Ms. Collins' judgment, and her judgment was rooted in racial bias." Simmons opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Agent Walker, I sincerely apologize. I should have come to the cabin myself before calling the police." "Yes, you should have." Preston reached into his briefcase and pulled out a business card, plain white, FBI seal. He placed it in Simmons' hand. "Your airline will be hearing from the Bureau and the Department of Justice." He picked up his briefcase, straightened his tie, and walked off the plane without looking back. Brenda Collins stood alone in the empty first-class cabin. Her legs wouldn't move. The overhead lights hummed. The silence pressed against her like a wall. For the first time in 22 years, she had nothing to say. Brenda didn't make it to the terminal. She collapsed into the jump seat in the rear galley. The same galley where she had picked up the interphone. The same galley where she had smiled after Preston was escorted off. She wasn't smiling now. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She fumbled with her phone, dropped it, picked it up, dropped it again. On the third try, she managed to dial her supervisor at SkyPoint's Atlanta Operations Center. "Greg, it's Brenda. I think I made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "The passenger in 2A, the one I reported, he's..." She swallowed. "He's FBI." Silence on the other end. The kind of silence that sounds like a career ending. "What do you mean, FBI?" "Special Agent in Charge, Atlanta Field Office. He showed me his badge, Greg. Gold shield, real credentials. He said the Bureau and the Department of Justice are going to contact us." More silence. Then Greg's voice came back, colder now, professional. The warmth was gone. "Walk me through exactly what happened. Every detail, from the moment he boarded." So Brenda did. She told him everything. The jet bridge, the boarding pass, the overhead bin, the incident form, the police call, the PA announcement. And as she spoke, she heard herself. Really heard herself. Every word coming out of her mouth sounded worse than the last. She kept pausing, trying to find the part where she was right, the part where her actions made sense. She couldn't find it. He was being uncooperative. How? He refused to move his bag. From the overhead bin above his own seat? Brenda didn't answer. What else? He questioned my authority. By doing what exactly? He said he had a ticket. The line went quiet again. When Greg spoke, his voice was flat. No anger, no sympathy. Just procedure. "Brenda, you're being pulled from your next 3 rotations effective immediately. Do not speak to any media. Do not post anything on social media. Do not contact the passenger. An internal review team will reach out within 24 hours. The line went dead. Brenda sat in the jump seat. The galley lights buzzed. The empty cabin stretched out in front of her. 12 first-class seats, all vacant now. The plastic cup, the one she'd slammed on Preston's tray, still sat there, half full, lukewarm. She stared at it until her eyes blurred. 45 minutes later, and 600 miles away, Officer Dale Hutchinson was finishing his shift report at the Dulles Airport Police Station. Routine paperwork. Incident at Gate B12. Passenger removed. Situation resolved. He signed the bottom of the form, slid it into the tray, poured himself a coffee. His desk phone rang. "Hutchinson, Commander Rawlings wants you in his office. Now." The walk from his desk to Commander Rawlings' door was 30 feet. It felt like a mile. Rawlings was standing behind his desk. Not sitting. Standing, arms folded. On his desk sat a printed email, forwarded from the FBI's Washington field office. "Close the door." Hutchinson closed it. "Do you know who you pulled off that plane this morning?" "A disruptive, Special Agent in Charge Preston Walker, FBI, Atlanta Field Office. 22 years of federal service. Leads a 200-agent task force. Testified before Congress. Twice." Hutchinson's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Your body camera footage has been pulled. I've watched all of it. The illegal search. The classified DOJ documents you handled without authorization. The tone. The smirk. All of it." Hutchinson's coffee cup was shaking in his hand. He set it down. "Commander, the flight attendant said—"
I don't care what she said. You are a law enforcement officer. Your job is to independently assess a situation. You didn't interview a single witness. You didn't ask a single question. You walked onto that aircraft and went straight to the black man. That's not policing. That's profiling. I was responding to a crew report. You were responding to your own bias, officer. And you did it on camera." Rawlings opened a folder, slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. "Effective immediately. You are placed on administrative leave without pay. Internal Affairs will conduct a full investigation. Badge and weapon on my desk. Now." Hutchinson stared at the paper. The words blurred. His throat tightened. He unclipped his badge, set it on the desk, removed his service weapon, set it beside the badge. Two objects, his entire identity, sitting on someone else's desk. He walked out of the office without a word. The video hit the internet at 6:47 p.m. that evening. Diane Aldridge sat at her kitchen table in Arlington, Virginia, laptop open, reading glasses on. Her hands still hadn't fully stopped shaking since the flight. She had watched the footage 4 times. Each time, it made her angrier. She uploaded it to social media with a single caption. "I watched a man get removed from a plane today for the crime of flying while black. He turned out to be an FBI special agent in charge. I recorded everything. Watch what happened." She closed the laptop and made herself a cup of tea. By the time she finished it, the video had 12,000 views. By midnight, 400,000. By 8 a.m. the next morning, 4 million. The comment section exploded. Thousands of people sharing their own stories, their own jet bridges, their own Brenda Collins. The video didn't just go viral. It detonated. Every major network picked it up before noon. Cable news ran it on split screens, the footage on one side, aviation law experts on the other. News chyrons scrolled across the bottom of every channel. FBI agent racially profiled on Skypoint flight. Flight attendant called police on black federal agent. Skypoint Airlines under fire after viral video airport officer suspended for illegal search of FBI agent. Skypoint Airlines stock dropped 3.2% by market open. By the closing bell, it had fallen another 1.8%, 5% total. Hundreds of millions of dollars, gone before the sun set. CEO Gerald Tate held an emergency board meeting at Skypoint's Dallas headquarters. The conference room was silent. 12 board members. No one was checking their phone. No one was looking at the stock ticker. They were all looking at Tate. And Tate had nothing. The Department of Transportation opened a formal investigation within 48 hours. Federal investigators subpoenaed Skypoint's internal complaint records, crew training documentation, and passenger incident reports going back 5 years. What they found was worse than anyone expected. Brenda Collins had 6 prior complaints. 6. All filed by passengers of color. All describing the same pattern: hostility at the jet bridge, unnecessary ID checks, fabricated incident reports, calls to the cockpit. The first complaint was filed 4 years ago, a black businessman in first class. Brenda had demanded to see his credit card to verify the purchase. He filed a formal complaint. Skypoint's internal review classified it as a personality conflict. No action taken. The second complaint, a Latina woman traveling with her daughter. Brenda told her the child needed a separate boarding pass for first class. The child was an infant sitting on her mother's lap. Complaint filed. Classified as a miscommunication. No action taken. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth. All dismissed. All buried. All stamped with the same rubber-stamped conclusion. Crew member acted within standard operating guidelines. 6 passengers, 6 complaints, 6 times the system looked the other way. The DOT investigators compiled their findings into a 60-page report. The summary was devastating. SkyPoint Airlines had maintained a pattern of shielding senior crew members from accountability, regardless of complaint validity. The airline's internal review process was, in the investigators' assessment, structurally designed to protect the company, not the passengers. Airport Police Internal Affairs completed their own investigation in parallel. Officer Dale Hutchinson was found to have violated department policy on 3 separate counts: unlawful detention of a passenger without probable cause, search and seizure without reasonable suspicion or consent, failure to independently assess the situation before taking enforcement action. His body camera footage was the centerpiece. Every second of it. The smirk, the snatched ID, the dangled briefcase, the whispered threat, all captured in high-definition clarity. The consequences came down fast, and they came down hard. Brenda Collins was terminated from SkyPoint Airlines. Effective immediately. No severance. No retirement package. 22 years, erased in a single phone call. The Federal Aviation Administration launched a separate review of her flight attendant certification. The result? A 5-year ban from working for any U.S. commercial carrier. She would never serve another passenger on American soil. Officer Dale Hutchinson was fired from the Dulles Airport Police Department. His law enforcement certification was revoked by the Commonwealth of Virginia. The FBI's Civil Rights Division opened a federal investigation into potential civil rights violations under color of law. If convicted, he faced up to 10 years in federal prison. SkyPoint Airlines was fined $1.2 million by the Department of Transportation. The airline was ordered to implement mandatory racial bias training for every crew member, gate agent, and ground operations employee, company-wide. Quarterly compliance audits, independent oversight, all at the airline's expense. CEO Gerald Tate held a press conference. He stood at a podium with the SkyPoint logo behind him. His hands gripped the edges of the lectern. His tie was slightly crooked. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in 3 days. On behalf of SkyPoint Airlines, I want to offer my deepest and most sincere apology to Special Agent in Charge Preston Walker. What happened on Flight 1482 was inexcusable. It does not reflect our values. It does not reflect our standards. And I take full personal responsibility for the systemic failures that allowed it to happen. He paused, swallowed. We failed, and we will do better. The cameras flashed. The reporters shouted questions. Tate stepped away from the podium without answering a single one. Captain Lloyd Simmons received a formal reprimand from SkyPoint's chief pilot. It would sit in his personnel file permanently. He was not terminated, but he didn't fight the reprimand. Instead, he voluntarily enrolled in an external bias training program. 6 months later, he became one of the airline's internal advocates for procedural reform, pushing for a policy requiring captains to personally assess any crew complaint before calling law enforcement. He never said so publicly, but people close to him said the look on Preston Walker's face, the calm, the control, the quiet devastation behind those eyes, stayed with him long after the cameras moved on. 3 days after the press conference, Preston Walker stood at a podium of his own. Deputy Director Carolyn Bassett stood behind him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't perform outrage. He simply spoke. What happened to me on that flight happens to Black Americans every single day. On planes, in traffic stops, in stores, in their own neighborhoods. The only difference is that I carry a badge. Most people who experience this don't have a badge. They don't have a title. They don't have a credential case that makes someone's face turn white. And they shouldn't need one. Nobody should need an FBI badge to be treated with basic human dignity. He paused, looked directly into the cameras. I was lucky. I had proof of who I am, But my identity, my worth, should never depend on what's in my jacket. It should depend on what's in my character, and that should be enough for everyone." The room was silent. Then the applause began. Diane Aldridge watched it from her living room. She was crying before he finished the first sentence. 6 months later, Preston Walker stood in a conference room at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. 32 agents sat in front of him, new recruits, fresh out of Quantico, notebooks open, backs straight. He wasn't there to talk about trafficking networks. He wasn't there to talk about federal warrants or surveillance protocols. He was there to teach a course he had built himself: bias, authority, and accountability. The syllabus was 60 pages long. It drew from case studies, court rulings, Department of Justice investigations, and one case that wasn't in any textbook, his own. He stood at the front of the room, no podium, no notes, just his voice. "Every one of you will carry a badge. Every one of you will have authority. And one day, every one of you will have to decide whether to use that authority to protect people or to control them. That decision will define your career, and it will define who you are." The room was silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of a plane cabin. The respectful silence of people who were listening. The course became mandatory across 3 field offices within a year. By the following spring, it was adopted bureau-wide. Preston never sought the spotlight. He never wrote a book. He never signed a media deal. He went back to Atlanta, back to his task force, back to his daughter and her purple blanket, and his morning coffee in the plain mug. But the ripple he created never stopped moving. Brenda Collins disappeared from public life. She deleted her social media accounts, changed her phone number, moved to a smaller town in Central Florida. A former colleague gave an interview to a local news outlet 8 months after the incident. The reporter asked a simple question: "Does Brenda feel she did anything wrong?" The colleague paused, then said, "She still thinks she was just doing her job." Some people lose everything and still learn nothing. Dale Hutchinson filed an appeal for his termination with the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services. The appeal was reviewed, deliberated, and denied unanimously. The panel cited his body camera footage as incontrovertible evidence of racial bias in the execution of his duties. He took a job with a private security firm in suburban Maryland. Night shifts, strip mall patrols. No badge, no gun, no authority. His name became a case study at 3 police academies in Virginia and Maryland. Instructors played his body camera footage frame by frame. The smirk, the snatched ID, the whispered promise. Every second became a lesson in what not to do. SkyPoint Airlines completed its DOT-mandated reforms ahead of schedule. Every crew member, every gate agent, every ground operations employee, 16,000 people trained in bias recognition and de-escalation over 9 months. Passenger complaints from people of color dropped 60% in the first year. The airline hired its first chief equity officer, a former civil rights attorney from the DOJ. Gerald Tate never fully recovered publicly. He kept his position as CEO, but the press conference footage followed him. Every earnings call, every shareholder meeting, every interview. The crooked tie, the trembling hands, the words, "We failed." Diane Aldridge received over 40,000 messages after the video went viral. Teachers, parents, students, strangers, all saying the same thing: "Thank you for pressing record." She responded to as many as she could. Her reply was always the same: "I didn't do anything brave. I just didn't look away." She was invited to speak at a national educators conference the following fall.
She stood in front of 3,000 teachers and said one sentence that brought the room to its feet.
We teach our children to stand up for what's right. The least we can do is show them what that looks like. If you were sitting in that cabin, in Diane's seat, would you have pressed record? Would you have said something? Or would you have looked away? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story hit you, if it made you feel something, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because every week we bring you stories where justice doesn't just get talked about, it gets served. And remember one thing before you go. Silence isn't neutral. Silence is a choice, and in moments like these, it's the wrong one.
So yeah, justice was served. 8 years, batch gone, law passed, done, but honestly, that's not what stays with me. What stays with me is this: your dignity has a price tag, and that price tag is your title. The moment they opened that briefcase and saw federal judge, everything changed. Suddenly, he mattered. But 5 minutes before that, he was face down on a cold marble with me on his back. Same man, same heartbeat. The only thing that changed was what people found out about him. And that taught me something I'd never forget. We don't get to own humanity, we're born with it. It's not a briefcase, it's not behind a title, it's not something you have to prove to a stranger who already decided who you are before you open your mouth. You don't need to be a judge to matter. You don't need to be a Sandra, somebody who doesn't look away. You don't have to be loud. You don't have to be brave. You just have to not look away. Deep down, we all know which one we'd be. The question is, are we okay with that answer? Tell me what the story made you feel. Drop it below. Like this if it moved you. Subscribe if you are new. And share it because somebody out there is alone with the briefcase and they need to know they still matter. You don't need to be titled, deserve respect. You never did.